My name is Nick and welcome to the Team Peachtree channel. I want to show you a graphic that shows, rather than volunteering to save the planet, like many South Africans, I really had very little choice but to install solar. Now, if you look at this graphic, gray is good, whereas yellow, orange and red means you sitting around a candle a lot, twiddling your thumbs. Now, in the last 4 months of 2022, the first 2 months of 2023, can you see just how much that grid is starting to look peachy? Lots of orange, yellow and red. So amidst news reports of a total grid collapse and Eskom's CEO being booted out of the company and people saying that this is the worst job in the world, CEO job in the world, I took the decision to install solar. And it was originally going to be installed in the first week of March, and then the company called me up and said, do I want to move it up by a week? And although that was good news, there was a bit of a sting in the tail. A day or two after installing solar, tax incentives were announced for private homeowners putting solar onto their roofs from March 1 onwards. So I would have qualified if I didn't take on that postponed installation, the early installation. But I mean, even if I had delayed my installation by about a week to make use of about $1,000 in tax breaks, that's about 15,000 Rand in tax breaks, because I live in a complex, I don't think I would have qualified anyway. So if you're a South African, even if you're not, here's what you need to know regarding solar installation. Some of it may be news to you, some of it may be pretty surprising. There's certain aspects that were a lot simpler and easier than you might imagine, and then other aspects that are a little bit surprising. If you think someone else would be interested in this information, please share on your social media, share on Twitter, wherever. You can also like this video and subscribe to this channel. And let's get started. So, number one, solar is simple, but also not. On paper, the solar panel system is fairly straightforward, and there are essentially three components: panels, an inverter, a battery. And they sort of arrive, when the installers came, they arrived in two trucks. You basically had the inverter and the battery in two separate boxes, not very big boxes, and then the panels stacked on top of one another, and it all seems very simple. But then when they unpack everything and you see all of the nuts and bolts and cables and trunking and pipes, then you see that there's quite a complicated process. It only takes about a day to install, probably even less than a day. The trickier part is the wiring, the drilling, the trunking, basically connecting this whole external system, piggybacking on your roof, to the internal system of your home. Right? The DB board, getting that connected to the SunSync system. The electrical work takes around a day and a half to install. So the total installation is about 36 hours, well, a day and a half. But it's the electrical aspect that takes that extra half day. The stuff on top of the roof has got to link up to wires that go through the roof, down the wall, and ideally into a kiosk for the battery and inverter. What I did was I used the domestic workers' restroom for my solar hub. That's also connected to the internet, which then connects to your Wi-Fi and then onto your phone. Number two, you may not be completely off-grid. Now, obviously, it depends on the system you use. The system I used, once the system is up and running, you'll see you still not 100% off-grid. So they sort of make sure that you are still using 20 watts or whatever, which is very little, but you are still somewhat connected to the grid. Running a stove and the geyser simultaneously at night uses up a lot of juice very quickly. But you can achieve being mostly off-grid and basically have the sort of peace of mind that when the power goes off for everyone else, day or night, you won't even know it. In fact, one nice moment when the system was installed, I think it was the next morning, something like 10 o'clock the next morning, we actually had load shedding, and they said, would you like us to turn the electricity on so that I could sort of turn my computer on? And it actually hasn't been off since. And then you don't actually even know when there's load shedding anymore. There is also more than enough stored battery power, for example, to run an air conditioner right through the night, have external lights on right through the night. I don't know whether you would have enough if you, for example, left the stove on right through the night or had the geyser on. That might be, but then of course it does alternate. Once you've depleted the battery, then it goes back onto the grid again. Number 3, it is still expensive. Now, you may or may not know that the optimum temperature for solar is 20 degrees Celsius. That's 77 Fahrenheit. So, no, solar doesn't thrive in deserts. If the panels get too hot, they are less efficient. Also, they are quite tough. They can sort of withstand hail and weather. The optimum angle for panels is 30 degrees. And typically the optimum time of day for maximum power generation is 12 noon. But you can imagine how all of that fluctuates. Sometimes the temperature is cooler, sometimes it's warmer, sometimes the way that the sun hits the panels is at a particular angle, and obviously once the sun starts arcing around, it may not be at optimum. But those are the optimum ranges. Besides all that nice to know stuff, what's less nice is the system at $10,000, that's about $175,000, that's for about 7 panels, is actually a lot more expensive than it was 6 months or a year ago. Some of my neighbors were put in similar systems for 70,000 Rand less. And what has changed, I thought the price would actually continue to go down, but instead it's actually gone up again due to high demand and low supply. The guys who installed my system said they do about 5 installations a week, and there is a 1 to 2 month waiting list at the moment, and I imagine that is going to, that traffic jam's only going to get worse. Number 4, too many cooks spoil the broth. Now, while you can get on with things fairly easily during the day, you can't have a lot of things on at the same time. You'll be surprised at how much electricity just a stove, a geyser, and an aircon use. If you have your app on and you put those 3 things on at the same time, you'll see just how much you're actually using. Now, it's fine using any of these one at a time, but if you really want to light up your entire house like a Christmas tree, then the dual supply will probably kick in once certain thresholds kick in. Number 5, it's not a fire and forget system. You don't just sort of turn it on and forget about it, although it's not like really high maintenance either. The installation does come with an app, and like the battery on your phone, you're going to want to keep an eye on it. Also worth knowing, the battery is delivered 80% charged, which is why sort of early the next morning you can kind of get the system up and running very, very quickly. The battery is also designed not to deplete below 20%, so it's not as though, like a cell phone, the battery goes all the way down. These batteries need to still maintain about a 20% charge, which means your range of draining the battery is slightly limited, especially in the evening. The best solution is to put your geyser on during the middle of the day and turn it off again after a minimum period. Number 6, keeping up with the Joneses. How many solar panels do you have? Well, how many do your neighbors have? It does become something of a status symbol, almost like displaying a shiny new car on your roof. Mm-hmm. Number 7, well done. You are now part of the solution. Now, I must say, what is really nice after installing this whole thing is you feel like you have some agency. You feel like you are not dependent. You're not some pawn in some system. You have gotten some independence. You've reclaimed some agency. And it's not just that. The world is greedy for energy, and there's there isn't enough to go around. There's not enough fuel. You've got icebergs breaking off. Apparently the Antarctic ice is at its lowest extent right now. There's also not enough juice to run the world's engines. So, take a leaf from a tree, how does that saying go? Take a leaf out of someone's book, take a leaf from a tree, go solar. Maybe while you're at it, plant a tree as well. That's another interesting thing with the app, is it actually shows, the longer that you're using the system, how you've effectively basically saved a tree or planted a tree. It's not enough to consume less. We must also try to contribute something as well. What I really like about the system, you might say, I don't really like looking at the battery and all that kind of thing, but you kind of realize that your home is an organism just like you, and there are times that it needs to sleep, and there are times that it needs to eat, and there are times that it needs to rest, and there are times that it needs to be active. And so you can kind of sync the activities of your house to the activities of yourself and to the activities of the sun, right? So that is another nifty thing that the SunSync system provides. It provides information on how many truckloads of coal you've saved and are saving, along with your return on investment. Any questions? Leave them in the comments. Keep weaving, and I'll see you guys next time.